Hello, everybody. I hope. I don't see anyone in the chat, but hopefully someone's there. Pardon the cord. There's Queenie. Oh, but in moving the cord, move this thing. All right, I'm going to see the cord again for a minute. We'll see. Nope, that doesn't work either. All right, new system, not without flaws. Nico, green users, it's nice to see you all again. I missed you last Monday. We had set up to get our vents cleaned because we have a house that's almost as old as I am. And I swear we did it for Tuesday. And then they sent us all these like texts and emails and stuff to confirm our Monday appointment. So rather than try to work around the noise and, you know, they had to be in every room because there's vents in every room, I just had to cancel the show. But now I'm back. And I waffled about what to do today, but we're going to make up for a tech problem. I was trying to talk about painting dark skin for during one of the days of Kwanzaa. I showed during one of the days of Kwanzaa, and that was a day beset by technical difficulties. So I'm going to have another stab at it today since it's Martin Luther King Day here in the United States. But I'm going to talk about a few other things too before we get down to that. So let's switch over to the other view. So these are colors that I swatched out from the Kickstarter, and these three are releasing today. So if you didn't get into the Kickstarter and you're interested in getting these colors, all of which I enjoy, you can now pick them up individually. I don't think it's being sold as a triad. I think it is individual. So Carnival Purple is Michael Proctor's favorite color, or one of Michael Proctor's favorite colors. This looks a little dark. Just bump that up. Well, yeah, that looks truer to the purple. And then bruised purple and ashen brown. And I'm going to see if I can try to work with the bruised purple and ashen brown. One of the things I like ashen brown for is actually shading very pale skin. I might not go down that dark, but I might in a few spots. Because it's interesting. So we're going to talk about very dark skin today, but then also shading very pale skin can be challenging. Because if you have much saturation in the shadows, it's going to look weird because saturated colors kind of go forward to the viewer a little more, but your shadows are supposed to recede. So I think that's part of what makes painting very pale skin challenging. And then painting very dark skin, as we will discover, one of the challenges is painting pretty bright highlights, but keeping them to a narrow area. So I just wanted to show those colors since I have them, and I have them here. I probably will not be using the Carnival Purple today, although I believe you can. Okay, so everyone else can hear sound. All right. I believe you can use purple in the shadows of almost anything. So, and then I wouldn't use it for skin, but if you're looking for a highlight color for ashen brown, and you can use bruised purple as a shadow color if you want. This is Mana Waste Gray from the Pathfinder line, and it's like a pale desaturated purple that I think would work well with the ashen brown for doing more like a leather or, you know, a non-standard human skin. I think it's a little too cool to use for a normal person's skin, but it's a possible experiment. Just figure out where I'm going to put the swatch now. Show you a few miniatures. Actually, I'm going to show you a few pictures before. No, I'll show you what I like to catch you guys up on what I've been working on. So last time I was here, I worked on this guy, and I do want to finish him. I kind of want to talk about finishing stuff. A few weeks ago, or maybe even a couple months ago, somebody asked me about how many projects I normally have on the go. And right now the answer is more than I'm comfortable with. So I would really like to get some of these things that are kind of half done finished, and encourage you guys to do the same thing. But since it is Martin Luther King Day today, I'm going to put him aside. I finally got these guys finished, other than I probably want to add some weathering powder and dirty them up a little more, particularly on their aprons, which I added paint to dirty them up a little. But and their bases are pretty plain in color. I often do change that with glazes. Oh, thank you for the sub, Casminia. But since I'm going to have weathering powders out for another project, I've left them on here until I finish that other project. So yeah, these guys have so much character. They're just super fun. Their faces were were great fun to paint. They have a lot of attitude. I think they're supposed to be brothers, but I thought it would be fun if one was a redhead instead. So they're both very similar skin tone, but I gave them a different hair color, including on their little halfling toes, of course. And then the one that's going to get the weathering powder, since Ron already spilled all of this on Reaper Live, I don't feel like I need to hide the fact that I'm painting the Bones USA Mini for next month, which is this guy. And right now he may look pretty weird to you, and he looks pretty weird to me. I did kind of just slap some random colors all over it. So you can still see that in the places I haven't painted. So like on the base and the weapons. They weren't completely random. I wanted to experiment with warm shadows and cool highlights. I think I've already learned that this is not the correct figure to do that, but this is a learning experience. I don't think it's going to ruin the figure. What I decided I'd go ahead and just do a really quick version of kind of color underpainting, because if it didn't work out, I could just go opaque over things and I wouldn't have lost a lot of time or ruined things for Ron. I will note this is a metal copy because I think they're probably still working on the mold for the Bones USA one. So the gray cloth is finished, so his hood and his pants, and there were sleeves that I forgot and had to return to later. And then this banded leather chest piece is finished. And then does anyone know if there's a real name for this? I kind of think of it as a capelet, but I mean, it's not cloth, it's an armor piece, so I don't know if there's a better term for that. And some of the straps, I'm going to continue this black color, I think, on some other parts of the figure. He's kind of like a street thug, assassin type of character. So I wanted to, well, not just I want to, Ron wants me to make him dirty. At first he said, brown and dirty. I'm like, okay, but I already painted Romag Davil, and he was like all brown and a lot of dirt. And I think I painted a female one, Terra, the anniversary Terra the Silent, and she had a lot of brown, although she had like a dull red that was the other color on her. So he said like grays and blacks and stuff will be fine too. So I've got some brown. I don't think you can see in the camera. Some of the like green and the other colors that I put sort of more in the midtones and highlights are shining through a little bit there. But one of the reasons I'm showing him is, apart from this weird color underpainting thing I did, I used bruise purple and ashen purple to do a lot of this thing. That's why I have actually I didn't end up using this mana waste, because I'm trying to make all the highlights kind of a light blue, so I mixed a light blue into the ashen brown to get just a little bit lighter in some spots. And then since for my warm color is magenta, but to make it dark enough it's magenta plus black. Another day I'll explain why I don't. This was not the right figure to try warm shadows, cool highlights on. I don't think it's going to ruin it or anything, but I think it would be more successful on a figure that's overall lighter in color scheme. So that's where he's at. And hopefully, it's going to take a little while longer. But it's interesting because I know that sometimes people like to have their colors all the same opacity and they want colors that are opaque. And the bruise purple is not. And there have been times when that's unfortunate. I tried to mix my own version of something like this and it wasn't opaque either. So it's not the best for, I started kind of like with the darkest color I was trying to layer beside each other or whatever. So it's not great to like layer up over dark colors. It's not great to put texture in. But what I did was just use the ashen brown and the lighter colors and then come back over it with that to kind of glaze in the darker sections on each square. And that works fine. Like, it works really well for that. So semi-transparent colors have their uses and their ways that you use them. And then there's other things that you can find more challenging to do with more opaque colors like the ashen brown. So I want to talk about dark-skinned people a little. And let's see if I can get my slideshow. Get my slideshow working today, because I always have a fun time with that. All right, I'm going to go first to what I hope will be pictures. And this was totally working before the show. Why is it not working now? Hello. All right, let's see if I press play, if we can get it working. Okay, this is so weird because my husband and I tested this before the show, and now it's not doing anything. That is a kind of a bummer. All right. Oh, good. You can see the picture of my cat hating snow. That's very useful. Although let's see if it's just that the image is updated. If I'm lucky, maybe the image is updated. And they did not. Okay. That is super weird, but we will just look at some minis and maybe I'll manage to have pictures that work another time. Maybe I'll go grab my iPhone or something. I'm going to see if I can do that because they're all in a place I should be able to get to. And we'll just try to see if I can avoid glare. All right, so I'm just trying to find how to figure out where the folders are. This thing seems very weird. I have like a very well organized Dropbox and it's not showing me any of that. This is annoying. Okay, no. All right, I apologize for this. I swear that I attempted to make this not stupid. No, that's not going to work very well either. Why is it doing it by time instead of, you know, what I actually want to see? Let's try that. There we go. At least I'm closer. Stream photos. That's what I want. All right, so let's look at some people with whatever dark skin. So this is actually a skin tone that I would say is, I mean, it's on the darker side, but it's like the darker end of a medium skin tone. So this I would say isn't super tricky to paint. It's just if you wanted to match this exact skin tone, it's picking out the warm colors that would make that work. This is, you can see that this is a very warm skin tone, which is going to be partly the person and it might be partly the conditions of the photograph. So this person has a cooler skin tone and I'm going to aim for something like this, maybe even a little cooler with the ashen brown and the bruised purple. And if I have time, I'm going to do a warm and a cool, but I at least want to show off the new colors. And then this is a very dark skin tone or a much darker skin tone, but you can see there are areas where there are quite strong highlights. So our skin has a slight sheen. And light reflects off of that, and that we need to incorporate that in our painting because that's what makes things look 3D and gives them shape as well as being interesting. So this helps you see her features better. This is another person with a fairly cool skin tone, and you can see again that there's quite a range between the darkest areas and the lightest areas, but it's keeping those lightest areas smaller is what's going to help the skin continue to read as dark instead of, because that'll be the problem that you have. You start adding highlights and then things don't seem as dark anymore. You can see that he's got quite a reflection sheen, and then even on his arms, like he's probably sweating a little because I bet he was just dancing or something. But even on his arms, there's some reflection points. I probably, yeah, so it says Unsplash. I got most of these off Unsplash. So they are photos that I'm allowed to freely use. You can just do Google searches as well and get a lot of photos. I just have to be careful for what I put on stream because I don't want to mess with people's copyright. So this is a person with an extremely dark skin tone, but you can still see how, look at how bright that reflection on her nose is and up there and on her cheekbone. Then these are paintings I've done digitally where it's a similar principle. So this is a person who doesn't have like a super dark skin tone. Hey Vaxar, Jellybean 1998, thanks for joining us. But very warm. And then this one, I'm kind of doing that. So the light is concentrated here and the rest of the face is either medium or dark. There's a little bit of a reflection on her nose as well. This was a picture where the light is fairly flat. And this is one of the reasons I suggest not using that kind of lighting for painting miniatures, because you can see that the facial features aren't as defined. And really what I ended up doing here and you have to, is playing a lot with color. So there's places where there's purples and greens and blues and whatever. This is like a big painting. I can get away with doing that here and use the colors to kind of define the planes of the face and stuff like that. But on a miniature, flat lighting is not a great choice. It's much better to go for like the dramatic kind of lighting that we saw in some of these photos. Even that this is not like super dramatic lighting, but like considered sort of a minimum level of what I would go for with skin for highlights and shadows. And again, this one isn't very dramatic lighting either. That's a little more, you know, the light's coming in from the side of his face and there's not as much on the other. And so these are even not extreme lighting examples, but most people seem to want to do, I'm calling it sitcom lighting. So if you think about how they light a sitcom, they have to light the whole scene because there's 3 different cameras and the people are going to be moving around, and they have to be able to see the people and their expressions and stuff from any angle. But it's not very dramatic or emotional lighting if you compare that to a movie or a dramatic TV show. Like if you watch The Expanse and you see, like every time I watch that, I'm blown away by how much they use lighting. And I'm not even the kind of person who normally notices that sort of thing, but they'll have like blue light from one direction and red light from another, or they'll be like totally shadowed here and light here. And it's really interesting. So if you think about movies where you're affected by the visual appearance of it, a lot of that is light. So paint more like that instead of like a boring sitcom person. So some years ago, and I forgot to dig up the photos. Well, those photos, I think I actually didn't forget. Those photos are probably not in, have not been given free to use permission because I did just get them off Google. But I had found a very cool skin tone photo and I incorporated that onto this figure. So he does have kind of purples, light purples in his skin. It might be Ashen Brown. I think the first incarnation. So Ashen Brown has been like canceled and brought back like 2 or 3 times now. So this might have been from the first incarnation. And then a lighter purple for the brightest highlights. So hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing. Like where his face looks shiny there, that's not a reflection. I've got there's just so much light on here now that I took the phone away. That where it looks like reflection, I painted it to look like that. And that's what we need to do. So that's the kind of a cool skin version. And then this is a warmer skin version. And sadly, she has had a little accident. And I would like to paint this figure again, actually, because I don't think that I did take the highlights up enough. I think I could make her face a little more interesting and more the focus if I spent a little more time making those tiny bright highlights. I mean, this is some years old now. And I really painted this. This is an example that I pass around in classes. So it's really more about the green skirt because that's what I would have people paint in the class. And then I just finished up the rest of the miniature to make it nicer to look at. And now I'm realizing I'm not sure I ever did actually finish her bracelet. Who knows? And so I use purple in the shadows here. I don't use Carnival Purple as much for something. I like Imperial Purple, I think is the one I end up using, but this would have worked in a similar way. If you glaze that in the shadows of a green or a blue, or even, I probably mixed it with the yellow a little, but it's in the shadows of her shirt. It's Imperial Purple in this case, because that's what I give people in the class to use. So that's that figure. And then this is one going back a little further in time. And again, I don't think I got the highlights small enough, but if you look at it from this view, you're probably looking kind of in the décolletage area. And that's because I think I did do the tight highlighting and on her collarbone a little more there, and I didn't quite get it on the face. And you can see that she's actually got, I think it's like this light green color. It's not quite as vibrant as that, as the eyeshadow, and a fairly bright lip. And people with darker skin often can get away with and look very attractive with pretty bright color in their makeup. So like bright lip colors and bright eye colors, or saturate, much more colorful than somebody with my kind of skin could be. So this is the guy I tried to paint when I was having all the technical problems. So of course he's this figure. Part of the reason I picked him was because I had extras because of having a weird order mix up. But also I thought about painting this figure, but if you compare the size of their faces, I've noticed that because of the way they like to do it's not scaling. Proportions. The proportions for the like gnome and halfling races in Reaper often have larger faces than humans and elves. So from a practice point of view, and this is one reason there's a gnome in the Learn to Paint Layer Up kit, because Ingrid's face is pretty large and good to practice on. I think I meant to see if I had one of her around, because she would be good for it too. I think this guy looks a little weird because I was painting with like not my best close-up glasses, and so the eyes and the mouth aren't that well done. And the blending's a little rougher than it probably looks on screen. Although the highlights seem like really stark, at least on my camera or my screen, and they're not that bad in life. So after I finish this, I'll try to take some pictures to show you next week, or after I finish the examples. But I thought maybe it would work better if I tried, if I just used her face, even if her features may not be exactly correct. Her hair, I mean, you could kind of, I don't know if you could kind of pretend her hair is like dreads. That was one reason I liked this guy. I thought you could kind of pretend his hair was twists or dreads or something, because the hairstyle is often what is going to cause the problem. And she looked like someone with straightened hair, I thought. But I just don't think you'll be able to see what I'm doing, and I'm not sure I'll be able to see what I'm doing if I paint it on her. I do think she'd look really nice with dark skin and then like a pink dress. Someday, perhaps I'll have time for that. But I am instead going to use these figures that if you guys and me can't see what I'm doing on here, then we're just doomed. We're just doomed, and I give up. So I will start with a cooler skin tone. I'm going to get my wet palette. Well, actually, I'm going to get the gray paper that's already been damaged by water out. Save the other one. But right now, I just put this paper down. And this is a good step if you're not very familiar with wet palettes. You may not realize about this step. I'm making sure that there's not unwanted little drops of water and that the paper is lying down as flat as I can get it. Because in areas where these little bubbles are, or if you get wrinkles like over here, if you have paint on there, it's not going to stay as wet, and it will even split a pool into two parts. That's just a little wet palette tip for today. This palette isn't quite as wet as I would really make it, because I may lift it up and move it around, and I don't want to spill it. But it is pretty dry here, considering I live in a place that's not that dry. I was noticing last night that my paint was drying really fast, and it was annoying. So I'm going to start with Ebony Flesh, which is a really great color, because I want to try to do, dark skin tones. Because I think if you want, like, not quite as dark, that it's not as big a stretch, I think, for what people are familiar with painting. Oh, and I did not write it down, but there's a photographer who's done this project, so it's Human-A, so Human A-E. So you look for the Human-A project, and I think she's from Brazil. She's from somewhere where there are people of a lot of different racial heritages. And so these are photos of people with no makeup on, and then she's put the Pantone color that best matches sort of the main color in their skin in the background. So if you've ever really wanted to look at some pictures of what colors can different skin be, the Human-A project is a really great place to look. And then it breaks down, since you have the Pantone, it's already breaking down some of the things. Now, I will say that I think, perhaps in order to avoid repetition, I don't know, the Pantone color that she picks and puts in the background isn't always what I would call the dominant mid-tone of their skin, like the color that I would start with if I were painting. I'm starting with the middle color and then I'm adding washes or layering, putting my shadows and then putting my highlights. So I would look at them a bit before I just took her word for it. You can sample if you have a computer program, or even just you can get little apps on your phone where you can sample colors with an eyedropper tool. I don't know that I will, since this is a large figure, I don't know that I will also have time to paint the chest area, so I will leave that off for now. So I don't know if you can see it, but there's like a little bubble. You probably can't because the paint's so shiny. If you see little bubbles, you do want to try to get rid of them. So pop them with the end of your brush. If I'm painting something, a surface that's very textured, like if I went fast over this fur, it would probably make bubbles for sure. And I will do a controlled spritz of air, compressed air, this stuff. So if you work at it, you can kind of do just a little spritz. If you spritz a lot on super wet paint, it absolutely will spatter. So you might have to practice the controlled spritz a little. So that's going to take a minute to dry, and I'll paint the other one since it is my hope to be able to do a warm and cool skin tone. And for black type skin, I think, for warm, I would say it's going to have a lot of like browns with a little more orange in them. And then the cool, I do think a little bit of purple, gray, but I wouldn't use like neutral gray. I'd use more like stony gray or something like that has a little bit of brown in it, because even though it's a cool skin tone, it's not like dead. It's not a true neutral color. You can try to blow on the bubbles too. It's funny, that same place made the bubble too. So it'll often be, and it's partly because I'm going fast. If you paint very carefully with a small amount of paint on your brush, and you can see I do just slop on brush coats. I did not, base coats. I did not thin this paint at all. For me, Reaper paint, at least if it's, fairly fresh. If you had the bottle like 10 years, you got to check it. See if it's got water evaporation and it's getting thicker. But if it's fairly fresh, or you've maintained it at a similar consistency, to me that's pretty much perfect base coat consistency out of the bottle. And now I wish I had done these base coats and then showed you the pictures and stuff. That was dumb of me, but not the first time. So, are any of you having fun with the snow? You saw the sideways kitty picture. He looks happier in that picture than he actually is. So he's making us show him that it's still snowy out every few hours, because he likes to go outside, but apparently he does not like the snow to touch his feet. So he's very distressed about the whole snow deal that's happening. I'm just looking for my black paint, because I think I had a different black and I think I moved it. I'm just going to paint this guy's eyebrows while I'm waiting and see if that makes him look less deranged. I'm all concerned that this figure ended up looking kind of deranged, which was not my intention. I mean, to be sure, he's not the most mild and innocuous person, but he does want you to come and shop at his restaurant, so he can't be too openly deranged. And I forgot until I was looking at when I completely painted just now, because I painted him first and then I painted his brother. So it's been a minute, but I forgot he had very prominently sculpted eyebrows, and that might help improve what I had done the other day. I think that was it. Focusing. I think that's a little better. Nico has no snow, just rain and eternally gray skies. We got a little bit of snow. It's funny, my mother-in-law always panics when she hears weather for Tennessee. And we live way East Tennessee, so I'm not in the mountains, but I'm right next to the mountains. So all the Tornado Alley forecasts and all that stuff, by the time it gets to us, it's almost always weakened. I'm not saying we never have terrible weather. We have flash floods and stuff like that, but we very rarely get actual tornadoes. And if we get snow, it's, we're not in the mountains, so it's not that bad of snow. And the city over the years has gone ahead and gotten snowplows and stuff. So it's rare that we have a problem for more than a few days. Now, I don't know if anyone else in the South has noticed that, because usually the way I know it's going to snow is I happen to go to the grocery store and the place is like cleaned out. Like there's no carts there, there's no milk, and there's no eggs, and there's no bread, and people are just running down that aisle freaking out. But I have seen from some of my friends in Canada that they got some snow. They got I think somebody posted a "Will your dog disappear in the snow" quiz or something, where you can check the size of your dog against the amount of snow that's fallen. So they're getting some snow. All right, just a little bit more for her. This one I was just messing in the shadows. And this was one of the figures I was testing dry brushes on the other day, so now I can do something else. And then I did something. I was testing something with that. Who knows what? These robes are pretty good if you want to test. Can you get big Bobby Jackson folds of cloth smooth? They're good ones to test that. So all right, I will start with mixing some ashen brown into the ebony flesh to get some additional layering shades. Although for kicks, I'm going to do this for shadows first, I think. So I'm just going to mention this because I know sometimes people are frustrated, like, how do you mix your mixes? So this is the starting ebony flesh. And then I mixed, so that's ashen brown out of the bottle, and I mixed it in. Ashen brown is clearly not a strong tinting color, because even though I thought I had mixed in proportions where I'd be getting, you know, some more of a range in between those, I did not get a range. I got two colors that are just slightly lighter than the ebony flesh. And this is why when people say, well, okay, how many drops do I mix in to make the highlight or whatever? I'm like, well, it doesn't work like that. It depends on the color. Which I know is frustrating, and you'd like it to work like that, but it doesn't work like that. So you kind of have to, my goal here is to have a range of colors from darker to lighter, where I'm going in, you know, logical steps. So I don't care how many drops of whatever I'm mixing to make that happen. That's what my goal is. And what did I pick to mix into that? I think I picked Warrior Flag. Oh, no, that's still... I was having trouble picking a cool color I liked, so we're gonna have a rosy shadow. I wonder if for kicks I should just use the mana. I think it's gonna be too undead looking or something. If I was making an undead dark skinned person, this might be a good highlight. So I was worried I would have all kinds of fun problems again today, because even if the weather's not too bad where I am, the weather may be bad in between where Twitch and I are. And so far, so good. Probably curse myself now because I said that. All right, so I think that's a range. Will I end up going that high? I don't know. I may not know until I get in there. I'd rather just mix stuff and not use it than have to spend more time mixing later. Is kind of my philosophy. But I did want to use the shadows, and I'm going to use coal black. So I found that actually it'll look nicer on the warm one, I think. Yeah, that one will work nicer on the warm one. So let's just go ahead and put some Carnival Purple in the shadows. I use at least 2 of the newly available colors. I'm pretty sure it's fairly transparent, but I'm going to check, because this is a dark color that I'll be going over. I don't think I have to go, you know, full on, barely can see a glaze. I'm going to look dangerously. Just make sure it's a little bit transparent. So yeah, we just got the pretty Christmas card kind of snow right now. other than the sad, sad cat. So I have one cat who thinks you're all going to die if it's under 70 degrees. So of course she's not happy. And we've called her Sad Southern Kitty. But now I think I have Angry Southern Kitty because he doesn't... he wants to go outside, but not in the snow. Can I go closer? Does the focus still look okay? Hello, Miniatures Den and Raiders. Got Arianas, Little Yin. Yep, and you can catch Miniatures Den on this channel on Wednesdays. I think starting at 1:30 Reaper time, but I'm not 100% sure. So today, since it's Martin Luther King Day in the United States, I'm painting dark skin. I know that's something that a lot of people find challenging, so I'm doing an example of a cool skin color, and then I hope to come back and do a warm skin color as well. So even though this purple is, lighter in value than the Ebony Flesh I put down first, it's going to look darker because when you mix colors, things get darker. Whether you're doing a physical mix or what this is like a visual mix because I'm putting one color on top of a dark color. So that is going to be my shadow color, is Carnival Purple, which is one of the colors that has released this month on the Reaper website. And it really is purple, so you can't tell on this dark color, but if I paint a little bit right here, it is a purple purple. But it looks nice as a skin shade, and a shade for a lot of other things too, actually. Fix the transition a little. All right, so now I'm going to get into the highlighting, and for the highlighting, I've mixed up these mixes. I have to keep my palette out of the frame or the camera hates focusing. So I'm not trying to hide anything I'm doing. I have not thinned these paints. Back in the day when I was first working on layering, I would have thinned them. So thinning your paint to make it a little more transparent is definitely something you can do to make your layer transitions look smoother. I don't do that anymore, and I like to have probably more jumps between it, like more steps and the layers than some people do, probably because I don't thin. Or you can do both. I mean, when I was having trouble with layering back in the day, I did both. I did a lot of steps and I thinned them down. So now I'm just going to start going up. I have found that the first layer or two where I'm going up from, whether I'm starting with the mid-tone or working up from the darkest color, that one needs to, those first couple of steps, if they're closer to my original paint, I'm going to see the banding less, and then I find I have to be less precise about it, or like less. There can be bigger jumps between the steps as I get further away from the starting color, because those are going in small areas, so it fools the eye a little easier. And then the trick here, and one reason I'm using a bigger figure, so I originally tried this, with people who came a little bit later, I originally tried this on a smaller figure, but it's challenging for me seeing in the conditions of the stream, and then also for you guys to see what I'm doing. But the trick with painting dark skin, or any kind of dark surface, is you still need those highlights and everything, and you definitely need them on skin, because skin has a sheen and reflects light. But to keep the skin overall a dark color, those have to be fairly small in area, which is, of course, is tricky to paint, particularly on a gaming scale figure. And when I painted that other figure, what I did is I will often go up. So I will go up from light to dark. I'll use my value scale. So pretend this is dark skin instead of gray. I'll go up from the darkest color to the lightest color. There actually is white paint here. You just can't see it very well. And then I'll come back down, trying to shrink the highlights and work on the transitions and get a larger amount of these dark colors showing. So hopefully that made sense. So what I'm doing now is the going up part. And I had some photos I looked at the beginning of the stream. But I'm not, in this case, I'm not really trying to follow an exact skin tone that I've seen. I have done that in the past. And if you want to practice with a particular type of skin tone, I recommend it. You can get photos and use any image program that can give you a dropper tip. You put the dropper over sections of the photo, and then you apply it over to a blank area or another part of the photo where you get some contrast, and it helps you isolate the colors that you're seeing. So I would get a few examples of kind of the colors in the middle, the colors in the brightest spots, and then the colors in the darkest spots, and use that to help pick out what paints I wanted to use. If I were doing like a study of an exact real person's skin tone. In this case, I wanted to show how this ashen brown, which is also a really nice color for shading light skin, is a good color for highlighting dark skin if you want like a cool color tone. I'm just identifying areas of the face that are protruding and would catch more light. And then when I put the purple in, I put those into areas that are recesses and would be more sheltered from getting light. That's where your deepest shadows are going to be. Now she has kind of, if you look at her face from the side, you can see it better. The face really angles inward. So most people, let's see if we can get this person. If you look at her face from the side, it angles a little, but the nose and the chin aren't quite parallel. There is a little bit of an angle, but it's more like this, and this person is like this. So that means that she's got her head down a little as part of what it is. But I think I would also say that she's sculpted as having less prominent of a chin, which means that this bottom part of her face really shouldn't be getting a lot of light. But I will probably accent this chin button a little bit. Where I'm seeing more of a problem is the sides of the lips here, like right here where the skin meets the upper lip or the bottom lip. That's usually a little brighter, and this area is usually a little brighter. But it's so inset on this particular figure that it looks kind of weird to do, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because that is what you would see more of on a standard sculpt that's facing forward more. That said, I do like to focus, the brightest highlights right in here. So, the tip of the nose, because that protrudes a lot. In this case, her eyelids are protruding a lot. The forehead slopes, so it's going to go more shadow down in this part and then more highlight up where it's curving towards us. I don't take the highlights up the full direction on the sides of the nostrils. The nares, maybe? I can't remember what so there's a name for these little bits of the nose that stick out to the side. I have not really learned anatomy. I've just kind of learned by doing this. Parts that stick out more or less. I'm reinforcing a little bit with some of the same colors before I start going up to the lighter colors. So now the trick for me, and I may even switch to a smaller brush, although this one has a good point, so if they're able to do it, is keeping these highlights to as small an area as I can while still having them have some effect. In a gaming scale figure, I tend to put the brightest highlight like right under here. But in actuality, it would be in a slightly different place on a larger scale face, but I'm not going to worry about that too much today. And here's where I might regret. I don't want to, with female characters, even if you're highlighting, If you do too much to the upper lip, you can sometimes get an unintended kind of mustache effect. So that is an area that if you're not feeling confident about it, don't mess with it too much. Let's say there's even like I have a little bit of that happening. I would probably try to, because of the way her face slopes inward. All right, now this is going to be the straight ashen brown, which for comparison to that purple, I'll just do a little bit on the dress. So if I switch this to black and white, I think it's pretty equivalent in value to this middle gray. Probably not exactly the same. And here's my starting color for comparison, the Ebony Flesh. So even though it's dark skin, there still should be good contrast. And I'm going to probably go higher than this for my highlights. It's keeping them to as small an area as possible. That's what's going to make it read still as dark skin, but bring out the features. Since she has that overhanging bang here, I probably won't go up as high on this cheek, regardless, like unless the light was coming from below this direction. This cheek just isn't going to get as much light as this cheek. And it looks really stark on the camera. But it does not look that stark in real life. So I will try to take pictures to show you next week. And I won't mess, like I'll leave it the way it, you know, however I finish up painting it today. I'll leave it looking like that and take pictures. So you can hopefully see the color and the placement a little more accurately. So these top highlights are looking a little rough, and that's kind of why I do the go up and come back down thing. So that was ashen brown mixed with a little bit of rosy shadow. And I don't think I feel like I want to go up too much brighter, but what the heck. Just go up a little bit brighter in a very small spot. And then I'll start trying to make it look smoother. But yes, to my dismay, it does not look that much smoother than the one I did on the smaller scale on the screen. I mean, right now it doesn't look smooth because it isn't. And this is the thing that makes painting dark colors tough. Like, I can paint patent leather where I go from like black straight up to white, but that doesn't mean that it's easy or fun. Because it's not. So here, what I'm trying to do is find the edges that don't look like they're blending in and hit them a little. They're still not going to totally blend in. It's like I'm fixing it from the center outwards. And I may expand the lower level highlights just a little as we go down. And I just keep doing that with the same layer mixes. I just, you know, now I don't want to touch in the middle of this highlight or I will darken it. But I want to get around the edges so that it looks like it blends in with the skin. And that will be easier if I don't have little hairs on the end of my brush. Hopefully the basic concept makes sense. Long ago, I think I read someone refer to it kind of as betweening. Like if I was trying to have this stripe and this stripe, right next to each other, I could eventually blend that by using the colors in between them. So that's essentially what I'm trying to do, just on a smaller scale. And wet overdrive for sure. So this isn't completely dry, and I'm letting each section dry before I do this on the figure. There's a certain amount of going back and forth. I may, take some color down too much and have to fix that. And this is actually not just how I paint dark skin. I paint a lot of things this way now. But I heard somebody refer to it as betweening. So it's like when they used to make animated movies in the old days when everybody drew everything out, the main animators, the key artists, the named people who had the big paying jobs, would do like the major frames, and then someone else would do the betweening, how the character gets from doing this to doing that. They would do the in between frames. Shrink that one down a little. And this is where I might thin my paint a bit more than I had been, depending on how opaque it is. And this ebony skin has pretty good coverage. So it is a somewhat opaque paint. And my paint's sitting here under the lights, so I'm going to thin it just a little. I hope that your screens are better than mine, because this does not look great on my screen, I have to say. Not that it looks like totally amazing and perfect in real life, but it doesn't look as bad as it does on the screen. Maybe the warmer color will work a little better on film. There are some things that on video just don't seem to capture as well as other things, or colors that get changed more significantly, or I don't really understand exactly what's happening, but I have noticed that some colors are definitely easier to film than others, and extremes are probably part of what is challenging to film. So if I sit down and try and paint something white, I suspect I will have just as much fun, and it will look just as crappy. That is the general principle. Oh, kind of wiped out too much of that highlight. Although in reality, I do often not go to, I want to always get something on the chin button. But it's not always very prominent. It depends on the figure and where the light is coming from. Now, what's this? Yeah, this was True Black. She's going to look a little weird because her hair color kind of doesn't match her skin tone. And also just when you're painting skin in general, when you start painting the lining or painting the hair around it, it'll look better. And then this black will give us the, as dark as her skin is, it's not really as dark as black. So hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of an idea. It's certainly not perfect. In fact, I'm not sure if I wiped out the highlights too much. And painting a face of this size to look smooth is something that would certainly take me a minute if I were not on camera. So that is the case. I'm going to paint her upper lip in the black too. Just a little bit at the bottom of the nose. I'm not going to do the full eyes, but I'll paint in the eyeliner. I think that helps tell a little more. Which figure is this? This is, I want to say she's Frost Giantess Queen. But it didn't occur to me that I should go look up the number when I decided to pick this figure. She's out in regular bones. I pulled off her staff because it was so white. For some reason I hadn't primed that, but she's the regular bones. But she's of the giants. A lot of the giants either have like their faces obscured or to the side, or they're making weird expressions. So I want to try to practice or demonstrate things on the giants sometimes, but they're not always great for the faces. But she has a nice, fairly accessible face. The other reason I pulled off the staff is because it would make it harder for you to see the face probably from some angles. But she's a very nice figure to paint. Lots of fun little details. Space if you want to add like crazy freehand and stuff. And then just smooth spaces and textured spaces. And I painted the studio version of this figure as well. Which maybe, the pictures may be up there. I don't know. Sometimes the pictures go up for the studio things and sometimes they don't. So if you follow that link and you see one that's wearing like blue and red clothes with a lot of gold jewelry, that's probably the one I painted. But that one was done kind of like a whole Viking team. And then because I feel like this is distracting, I'll get rid of the last of that white that was showing. All right, maybe I will go ahead and put the black in before I start, although I will end up having to do some of it after as well. Just so you have the contrast. There is no painted pic there. Where would I tell you to go look for a painted picture? Maybe I'll put it on my Facebook page. She was at some MSP open or another. It was before the new hotel. Back in the Premier Event Center. I should have brought her over because that one I put so much work into that I did not give her up. Reaper does get almost all of the things I paint, but every now and then I'll be like, nope, I don't want to keep that one. Got a little bit of black on my nose. So this one for the shadows, because I'm going to do a warm skin, I'm going to do a cool shadow for fun. And I'm going to pick this coal black. I don't know if it'd be fun to even go like totally crazy. Clear blue and clear green. Make my own teal. I did use a color very similar to this when I painted a figure that I don't have here to show. So the cool greeny blue kind of plays off warm oranges in the skins. So I'll just, that's the color that I mixed up, which Maybe it needs just a smidge more blue, I think. So that's the color I remixed up. And because those are clears, they're going to be pretty transparent like that Carnival Purple was on the cool skin tone. So I'm just going to go straight in. Now, if I were doing this for real, would I thin that down a little? Yes, I probably would. Is surprisingly intense considering how transparent our old friends the Thalos are. So I might just mix a little with the Ebony and fix it back up. So I'm starting with the Ebony Flesh again because I think the Ebony really has the flexibility to go cool or warm. And then I will mix a set of warmer highlights. Just fixing up the line from the shadow a little, but you can kind of see the hollow in her cheekbone better now, I think. With the application of the teal. I just probably needed to thin it a tiny smidge. And the light on the chin right now, that is just reflection. Because that is how dark colors work. That's why we gotta paint it on the dark skin so that it's there exactly where we want it. All right, I'm just trying to move my cool colors so I don't unintentionally use a cool color. All right, this is Mwangi Brown, which is another Pathfinder color. That is, if you want like a slightly less dark skin, that would be a good starting point. I'm going to use it as a highlight. And then this Ready Flesh is from the MSP Bones. And that's a really interesting skin tone that I don't think there's another equivalent for in the line, really. There's probably some leather colors that might be kind of similar, but you get that kind of golden yellow in there. But that shot, yeah, the bronze shadow is even warmer. I think I'm going to use that. And then if I really want to go light, I have bronze skin. Fun with dropper bottles, as usual. But that's okay. That's why we have pokers. Oh, more Raiders. Hi, Rikers Iron. How are you guys doing today? I'm painting some dark skin on this lady. Just mixing up my transitions since it is Martin Luther King Day today, and I know a lot of people struggle with painting dark skin or wonder what colors to use to paint dark skin. It isn't always a struggle. Sometimes it's which colors are best. For this one, oops, wow, these paints are really spritzing all over the place. That's weird. Sounds like I've been on a plane lately. So since this is meant to be a warm skin tone, I'm starting with this Ebony Flesh and this nice warm Mwangi Brown. Then where did my bronze shadow go? Bronze shadow and bronze skin for the brightest highlights. I need to mix another transition, and I will show you my palette in just a sec. And I'll zoom out a little for that. Maybe I'll zoom out a little more even for that. So here's my palette. This side I was using to paint a similar you know, as dark a skin tone, and starting with that same Ebony Flesh, but a much cooler one. So I use this purple in the shadows, and then Ashen Brown, which is a color that just released this month, and I use Rosy Shadow for the lighter colors. And then for this warmer version, I'm starting with the same Ebony Brown, but then the Mwangi Brown, and mixing with Bronze Shadow, and then Bronze Skin, and I mixed a teal color with clear blue and clear green, but you would get a similar effect with something like Coal Black. I just wanted to use a super saturated color because it seems like that shouldn't work on skin, but you would be surprised what you can do in the shadows of skin. Similar process. I do normally put my figures on a holder, but she is super large and I'm not painting this for real, so I don't care if I'm getting skin oils on it, although I did wash my hands before the stream. And I almost always do wash my hands before I sit down and paint so that I am not getting skin oils on my figures. And actually, I will share that hot tip. I didn't grab my super glue, but if you're somebody who gets like little splits in your thumbs, just put a little dab of super glue in there and hold it shut, because what happens is, how did I read about it? So the dry air makes it split, and then the dry air makes it split and split more, and it's really painful. So if you just close it up, it'll stop being as bad. Crows and Bones asks, I know this is a Reaper stream with a Reaper employee, but I'm curious, do you use any other brands of paint or only when you're off the clock? I'm a Reaper contract employee. I'm not a Reaper employee. I do use some other brands. I really do use primarily Reaper paints. And I was using them before I started working with Reaper. Reaper tends to get people to work for them who already like their products rather than trying to convince people to like their products and then work for them. They fit well with my style of painting, which is this layering that I'm demonstrating here, although I do use them for wet blending and stuff sometimes. I have Proprietary Press P3 paints, which I have not really used since I originally bought them. Like, I painted a few figures with them, and they worked differently enough that it was frustrating. And I was much earlier in my painting journey at this point. This was like right when they released, so I don't even know how many years ago, at least 15, probably 18 years ago. So I thought they were a high quality paint. They just didn't work with my way of painting. I recently reorganized my paint shelf. I should have brought a picture of that actually, because you guys on stream, you've seen me. Some of you have seen me do these swatching things. So after I had everything swatched out, I was thinking about my shelves, and I was like, I don't really like the way they're laid out. And then I had those P3 paints that were in a separate box, and I had Nocturna did a Kickstarter for something they called their paints end paints, which is not a great term to try to search online because it's a little vague. But I got those as well, and I ended up using some of them recently for the project that I can't show you guys because I don't think Ron has spilled the beans on that one. But the colors were just too perfect for what I wanted. It was like, I had some other colors that were like kind of similar, but half of them were canceled anyway. So I'm like, okay, even though this is a Reaper project, I'm going to use these other colors. And Reaper's very friendly to the rest of the industry. Like, their attitude is kind of, we're all in it together. It's not a competition where they're trying to beat out all the other guys and be the last man standing. Reaper employees who love GW stuff and play their games and, paint and use some of their tools and stuff. I certainly paint other brands of figures on occasion. Now that I'm getting older and I like things in larger scale, like if I want busts and stuff, I often get those from other people. So those Nocturna paints, I haven't worked with them enough to really comment. I did go through all of them and swatch them out. Not quite the same way I did the others, and I do want to kind of go back and do it that way. But they really were very variable. So a lot of the dark colors seem kind of like ready to use straight out of the bottle, almost more, not quite glazed, but the way I was tinting the shadows in the skin. And I think they might have done that on purpose because it's meant to be kind of glazed over shadows on things. And some of the colors, the lighter colors, were like really thick, even though I've had them a little more than a year, and I hadn't opened most of them. But some of them needed to have water added. Like I was worried they were gonna kind of get too thick. I recently, like a couple years ago, 3 years ago maybe, tell us we won't tell Ron. Well, I took it all away, so I don't even. I showed you guys the colors a couple streams ago, I think, but I put them somewhere now. So I always try to clean up so things aren't too crazy. But yeah, I think I even put them kind of on the other side of the desk. But the figure is safely hidden away, so you can't see the figure. I have Viejo Air. I like their metallics a lot. I have to go buy some again because when I was doing my paint maintenance, a lot of my metallics are what suffered from my not having done that for several years. Metallics just go bad faster. So I've replaced my Reaper ones that went bad, but now I need to get out to the hobby store sometime and get my Viejo Air ones back. The golds have some weird colors, and a lot of the silvers are similar, so it's not like you need all of them. But they're pretty nice metallic. I tried Viejo model paints again a few years ago, and I just don't like them. I don't like how they feel on my brush. I don't like that the sheen really varies. Some of them are kind of shiny, some of them are fairly matte. That doesn't mean I don't think they're not a good quality paint, but they don't work well with how my brain works and how I train myself to paint. So I don't have a lot of those, and I won't be adding a lot of those to my collection. I don't have a lot of GW paints, which is less to do with the paint. I haven't even tried their current paint line, but I hate their bottles. The paints dry out. It's like, and I'm not the first person to say that. People have been saying that for years. So at a certain point, I almost wonder, like, is this intentional? Are you guys really trying to make people have to buy your paint over and over again because they, stop painting for 6 months and then they come back and the bottles are drying out? Because that's pretty cheesy. Which is not to say that, dropper bottle paints never dry out, but like the P3 paints and the Nocturna paints are all in those flip top things. And I was really impressed with the P3 paints when I did my paint maintenance, even though I had neglected them, and I don't think I've gotten them in every paint maintenance cycle I've done. And there is a link on my page, my blog up there. Quindy will probably go find it, but it's how to maintain your paints. So I do recommend doing this every 3 or 4 years. Go through your paints, and you have to, like, if you have the dropper bottle style like this, you have to pop the tip off, and you have to look in here. I'll do it very cautiously, because this is the messiest job in paint, is doing this. So you have to pop these off, because sometimes paint will get stuck up in there, and it'll start drying out, even though the paint in the bottle is fine. Or you'll have paints that separate, and you have to get in there and actually stir with a stir stick. Shaking, even I have a vortex mixer. Shaking isn't going to do it. You have to get in with one of these, or something like that, an old paint brush handle, and physically agitate the pigment that started to collect at the bottom to mix it with the binder that's floating on the top. And I recommend doing that every 2 years or so. Then you add more water if you need to. And I have paints that, were canceled years ago that my bottle of them is still workable because I have gone through and done that. So, but I was very impressed with the privateer paints because I don't think that I had done that to them every time that I've kind of done my cycle. In fact, if I had to guess, I would say it had probably been 8 or 9 years, if not longer, since I had paid any attention to them. And they were in great shape. Most of them I didn't even have to have water to. I think there was 1 or 2 that had a problem. But I was just like super impressed. Even the metallics seemed to do all right, which in my experience, those go off pretty quickly. I think because the flake is heavier, so it settles. This is my guess at any rate. So even though I prefer dropper bottles to pots for a variety of reasons. You can make good pots, but GW seems to have chosen not to. And as a consumer, I disagree with this choice. I know that there are people who, and I'm thinking about doing this with the privateer press and the Nocturna Paints, not because there's a problem with the pots, because as mentioned, I'm actually very impressed with the pots. But I have some hand and wrist problems, and my hands were like really sore after I worked with the, when I was opening and closing and shaking and opening all the bottles of one of those lines or the other. My hands were in bad shape, and I have trouble getting those things open sometimes. So I was debating whether I really wanted to go through the thrill of decanting them, and then you got to figure out the labels. But they would take up a little less space that way too. But when I did my reorganization, I mixed all those things in together, so everything is now organized by color and then value. And my previous system had been a little too, it's like I had bright greens, and then I had khaki greens, and then I had like soft greens, and it was a bit insane. When I went to try to put things away, I would have trouble finding them. So talking about ways to organize your paint is the thing that's my most recent blog article. So if you just go to birdwithbrush.com and hit blog, you will get there. And then a follow-up one I want to write. So if you guys have anything you want to suggest, is like how to actually store them. So cases, shelves, racks. Everybody has different needs. Some people you want it on your desk. Some people you don't have a permanent setup, so you have to be able to, pack up and put it away when you're finished painting. So I want to try to find options that work for everybody. My system ended up being, and you can't see it because it's like the opposite. It should be behind me, but the way setting up my studio worked out, it's opposite me. I have like 8 nail bottle racks screwed into the wall. And they are full now. So when I did my reorganization and I mixed in those 2 sets of paint that I had previously kept out separately, sometimes I like to, if I haven't used a paint a lot, I'll keep it out separately and then try to paint a miniature like with just those paints to push myself to get used to trying them and exploring their options and stuff. But I decided it'd be better to mix them in so I could easily see exactly the color I want. And after I did that, I realized that I had a space problem, and even though I can fit my husband calculated it, I like not to remember the number. I think it was like 700 or 800 dropper bottles, somewhere between 600 and 800 dropper bottles is what I could fit on the shelves, and I exceeded that. So what I ended up taking out were, I had a bunch of premix washes from Viejo, Games Workshop, and Secret Weapon, I think, and I just don't use them very much. A lot of them are kind of shiny, and I just don't, most of the time if I want to wash, I'll mix my own. Oh, hi, Sentimental Minis and Raiders. We've had a lot of raids today. Wow. Thank you, Sentimental Minis. Since it's Martin Luther King Day in the U.S., I thought that I would talk about painting dark skin, because I know it's tough for people. So I do think that the warm skin is showing up better on the camera than the cool skin did. The cool skin really looks like the highlights are quite choppy, and it does look very natural on my screen is not the best. But this looks more natural in person than it looks on my screen, because the warm skin is really nice, and there are going to be times when that's the right answer. But if you were here for the slideshows, and I could briefly show those again, not everybody has a warm skin tone that has darker skin, and of course lighting conditions will affect that a lot. So there may be times when you end up not wanting to paint a very warm skin color like this one. So I wanted to show a bit of both. But yeah, in terms of how well the camera likes it, I think the camera likes the warm skin tone a lot more than the cool one. This camera, I think I will try to take still pictures and show them next week. And for the benefit of people who came a little later, I will try to do my slideshows again. Oops. I don't know what I clicked. I'm trying to click the eyeball on my little thing here. Okay, now you got the cat again, sorry. That's my cat hitting snow. And now it's not showing the pictures again. It's so weird. Okay, I have no idea why this works sometimes and not other times. Let's see if I can get these ones to work. Nope, it does not appear so. Well, anyway, I was trying to show pictures of real actual humans with various skin colors. Even the cat isn't working anymore. The cat is not supposed to be sideways either. But I will give that up and show some other figures instead. But I do recommend looking at real pictures. The thing that was most noticeable in the pictures that I had is just how bright the highlights go. He is a chonky boy. If you like chonky cats, so if you're on Facebook, there's a Facebook group called This Cat is Chonky, and I think there's like a space between the C and the H and so on. And oh my gosh, there are cats that make that guy look like a slim little model. But he is a lot of cat. He has a lot of attitude. And right now he's hating the snow. So the first time I did this, and this was one of the figures when I was first trying to, study up painting dark skin a little better, I found a picture of someone with a very warm skin tone, and then a picture of someone with a much cooler skin tone, which I think a lot was the photo. The photo kind of had a purple cast, but I still thought it was really interesting, so that's what I used on this guy. And it's too bad I can't get the photos to work. Oh, no, that's right. We looked at them on my phone. That's why. They never were working there. I'll get my phone in just a sec. But the way his cheeks look shiny, I've painted that, and you will see that in a lot of pictures of people with darker skin tones. So he was an example of the cooler skin tone. I no longer own the mini where I did the first experiment with the warmer skin tone, but she is fairly close. And I need to fix her someday, poor thing, because she's got that big chip. But I don't, and there's little chips too. I did not go bright and tight enough on the highlights with her skin, I don't think. So I don't think her skin looks as interesting as it could. And then this one's actually even older. And I would say a similar thing. Kind of her chest is more interesting to look at than her face, because I was a little tighter and brighter with the highlights there probably. I did try to use colorful makeup, which you can do with dark skin tones, and it works pretty well. This is the figure I tried to paint during Kwanzaa, which again, it's not as cool as this skin tone, I don't think. Well, it's pretty. I think I used saddle brown, which is another color that works really well either for highlighting a cooler dark skin or for shading a really pale skin. So ashen brown and saddle brown are kind of my two secret weapons for doing shadows on super pale skin. But I picked this guy because his face is big. But then I decided we needed to go really big. Hi, Pendrag. Kurniko uses one of those big multicolored, really useful box storage towers. It's already color-coded for my convenience. Crows and Bones uses a leftover retail display from my pet food store job. This brand called Stella and Chewy had some cardboard displays that are perfect. Holds almost 50 paints each. Plus I have 2 Reaper bleachers. Yeah, I have the Reaper bleacher. I have one of those near my desk, which is how I was able to grab these. So I keep kind of my most intense pure pigment paints here. Because I did forget to mention when we were talking about different paint brands. I also have paints I have the Chimera Colors. And then Liquitex has, Liquitex and Golden both reinvented miniature paint recently. And I have those. But I need to explore with them a little more before I really comment about recommending them or not. But let me get my Dropbox back for a sec so we can look at the pictures. Just turn off that light of people with dark skin. So this person I would say isn't even like super dark, but you can still see that the reflection highlights are pretty prominent. But as we start looking at people, this is more of a cool skin, so that's like a warm skin, and that's a cool skin, kind of what I was trying to do in terms of the faces I was painting today. This is a much darker skin, but you can still see the reflection areas are small, but they get pretty light. Like, look at how small it is on the side of her nostril. And then this is another example of a cool color. Her highlights are a little more evenly distributed, which is probably due to how the picture is lit. And then this guy, he kind of has what I did with the figure here, where you can see the cheekbones are quite shiny because our skin has oils and sheen and stuff, and the nose in particular. And this is true of every face, not just a face with darker skin. And there's a lady who has very dark skin and still has fairly prominent highlights. Then these are ones that I painted not with miniatures. I've done these digitally, but I've followed a similar idea. I mean, I'm using reference photos where I'm trying to emphasize some areas of the skin are dark by having some areas of the skin lighter. This guy breaks the rule a little, and I was talking a bit about lighting, but that's a bit of a different story. And then this photo really had great prominent highlights that were fun to do. And then you can just one of the fun things about dark skin is going nuts with color in the shadows. Like, I mean, that's just straight up magenta, really. That's very purple color. That's just straight up purple. And you can do that with darker skin even more. Like, you can do it with medium skin tones as well, but you can do it even more with darker skin tones. And it's the same thing here. There's a lot of purple and pink and yellow, orange. The oil painter that I study with sometimes blue paints pure color on, like, just kind of layers and layers of pure color, and so eventually it kind of ends up looking like a normal person, but then also has all these interesting color details inside. Crows and Bones has heard mixed reviews about Chimera, either really good or disappointing. I have not experimented with them a lot, but they do a weird thing that I can't quite figure. Let me see if I can get... So this concerns me. If I zoom way in here, and I will get... I took the other one away, but I have Reaper. I have other brands of this color too, but I'll just red. So I don't know if you can see it. There are little cracks there. Now that is because the paint was thick, but I've done this with other brands of paint, and they don't do it. So that's Liquitex, and it didn't do it. That's Reaper, and it didn't do it. I've only really seen this with either, like, I've had a few situations where I've had, like, black paint that I painted on a base rinse crack or something, and my understanding is if you try to dry something too quickly, it could craze, so I think that's crazing more than cracking. Apparently there's a distinction. I was watching Liquitex or Golden, and they were talking about this is why you shouldn't use a hairdryer. I'll use it on air still, but you don't want the top layer of paint to dry before the paint that's inside. And I think that's what's happening here, because I've also noticed that if I put it on my palette, it skins over, which seems really weird. Like, it's on a wet palette, it'll skin over, and I don't understand that at all. But I've also seen people do amazing things with it, so I'm a little concerned about the durability. Like, would I use it on gaming figures? I don't know. I think I would have to do some tests and make sure. I certainly wouldn't use it thickly, I don't think, since it's in the thick applications that it seems to do that cracking thing. But they do have true ultramarine blue now, which is like my favorite colors. So I am tempted to order their expansion set of paints. Samurai Jack has essential oil stands on my paint desk for my top 200 paints, and then I have lipstick grid inserts for my IKEA Alex drawers and Reaper paint totes for the rest. Lipstick grid inserts, that's an interesting idea for drawers, because I was thinking about drawers, but I wasn't sure how you would organize them, so I'm going to have to try to remember that and see if I can look that up. But yeah, essential oils, nail polish, there are spices. I think there are a lot of things that are kind of similar in size to our paint bottles, and it's worth looking at those, because sometimes something that's purpose-made is more expensive because it's a little more niche. Pendrake is subsisting on Gatorade and Sprite. Oh wait, Sprite. Pendrake, I hope you feel well enough to have Sprite soon. it's sad if you don't have enough energy for spite, right? But I also need to experiment more with the Liquitex paints. I rebottled those, obviously. This is not the bottle that the Chimera paints come in, and this is not the bottle that the Liquitex paints come in. I wanted to take up less space on my desk and also be more portable, because I sometimes take these with me, but I have not rebottled the golden paints that come like this. And they're super nice because they put the swatch on there for you. I mean, that's pretty time saving, although I would do a swatch slightly differently on my own. But and they have these black lines, so you can kind of tell straight out the gate how opaque or transparent your paint is when you buy it in the store. But this stuff is, so far as I can tell, essentially miniatures paint reinvented by Golden. But I do need to experiment with it a little more to prove that. Crows and Bones also uses a lipstick grid organizer for mediums and additives. And Shezza Gaming does subsist on Gatorade and Spite. Samurai Jack says there are MDF and plastic inserts for the grids, and you can skip rows to make bigger spots for FW inks if need be. Yes, that's true, because these ink bottles, they make a fat ink bottle. Because that's a regular Reaper paint. That's a lot of space taken up, whereas the Liquitex ink, and I do, for anyone who's, this is paint. This is acrylic paint. If it says acrylic ink, it's acrylic paint. It's just a more fluid binder than what we use. And then this is the Golden version, which Golden likes to make sure you know all their things are acrylic. So they call it high flow acrylics, but it's the same thing as FW or Liquitex ink. It's meant to be put in pens or whatever other things our store people do with it. And those I have at my desk for a similar reason as I have like the Reaper Clears and stuff for tinting and whatnot. And it's the same thing. Like they called their thing So Flat Matte Acrylics. Liquitex called theirs Liquitex Acrylic Gouache. Gouache is a different kind of paint. It's like saying acrylic watercolor. It's like, well, that's not a thing, really, but okay, thanks, Liquitex. But everybody does it different way. This is not Forge World. So De La Rowney is like a standard art store company. You might find these at some hobby stores too. Like, I mean, the Michaels and Joann's type hobby store, not their hobby store. I do not know what FW stands for. They don't seem to want to tell us anywhere here on the bottom. It is made in England, which is surprising because a lot of people have farmed out their paint making to China and stuff. But okay, so does anyone have any questions about painting dark skin? Hi, Rise of Mages. Or any of the other stuff that I've been showing today. Show more weird inks or paints or whatever. I think I did forget to show this guy. So I am, not that this is painted, but this is the Reaper USA, Bones USA figure for this month. So if you order like $40 US worth of stuff, you get this guy for free, or you can just go buy one if you want. He is a Noel Ravager, I believe, sculpted by Julie Guthrie, and he really is quite ticked off. I wouldn't mess with him. I would enjoy painting him, but Ron has given me enough assignments right now, and I have so many things I'm like halfway through painting with you guys. Like this guy, which is probably what I'm probably going to try to finish him next week. My store flyer color scheme guy. So we got up to this point on stream, so if you go back and look at previous streams, Shezza Gaming says how to paint. Well, I do try to share how to paint. You can look at, and then this is going to be the Bones USA figure for next month that is in the mid-process of painting, and I'm trying some new stuff. But so this coat here includes those colors I was talking about earlier, the bruised purple, and then some of that ashen brown that I was using on the skin. Because I just kind of wanted to show those colors in practice. And then the weird colors are actually those... not the Chimeras, because I'm not sure of whether they are sturdy base. I was using the Liquitex just to do kind of a color underpainting thing, which I don't know that I think it worked, but it's fun to experiment sometime. He is a pretty cool model. He is very intense. If you need some street thug type models, you get this guy and Romain Davel, and either you can be a scary street thug kind of guy, or you can threaten your players with a scary street thug kind of guy. Let's see. There's other cool things I could do on her. Although I have a limited color selection with me at this time. I'm going to try to paint the eyes, since they are bigger eyes. I normally actually try to paint eyes first. So my first tip for painting eyes is don't use pure white. I like this linden white a lot. If the eyes are very small, if this is a tip from Anne, if you have something with a little bit of blue in it, so Vampire Pallor, there was Maggot White, got canceled, but it's kind of similar, and then Ghost White has a little bit of blue in it. Those will help the eyes pop, especially if your skin tone's warmer, which most skin tones are going to be warmer than a pale green or a pale blue. So I normally paint eyes first so that if I mess it up, I can do it over and over again and I'm not messing up my paint job. I also find that I enjoy looking at the miniature a bit more. I'm just adding a bit of water to this. There's a color with white in it. It's a little thick. How would I paint hands with dark skin? I would look at photos, especially if the palm of the hand was showing, because I have noticed that there can be a significant skin tone variation between the back of a palm and the back of the hand and the palm. And the same thing with feet, actually, if someone's feet were showing. I don't think I actually did that with this figure, even though he does have his hand out. I don't think that I looked at reference. So I got the basic skin tone from that, but I think I just had pictures of faces or like from, kind of shoulders up. But based on what I was seeing when I looked for the reference pictures that I showed earlier, I would study the skin tones and try to get something that matched. For painting hands in general, her hands are terrible to show that. Let's see, is this hand better? Not awfully. I did not pick figures with great hands to do this exercise on. Who else do I have around here? Oh, this guy's a great figure to practice dark skin on, but he was smaller, so I think he'd show as well. And he has his hands facing down too. I like to emphasize the knuckles and sometimes even the bones under the back of the hand that go to the finger. Let's see if I can. In some positions, they'll be quite prominent, and I tend to exaggerate that. The knuckles, in standard skin tones at least, you can see how it looks really white. So that's partly the light hitting it, but it's also because there's cartilage under there, and this is true of knees and elbows and stuff as well. So I highlight these more than just based on the light. I would use the same techniques that I used for this, where, if the ebony brown or ebony skin is essentially my mid-tone, I'm painting someone with very dark skin, so I'm starting here, then I'm taking my layers up lighter. So I most often paint by layering. If something's a very large area, I might do some wet blending, but I would use these layers, just like I did it on stream. So if you weren't here earlier and you want to go back and watch the stream, I did this process with both of these skin tones. So I started with this color, and then I just went up applying these that did not really apply a lot of that. The trick with dark skin is keeping those highlights so small. So what I usually end up doing is going back down. And there I'm working on the transition lines and tightening things up so that they're in a smaller and smaller area. Let's double check that I did do that with the warm skin color. But I can kind of do an example. I don't know how well you can see it on the camera, but there's a brighter dot there that looks a little too prominent. But first of all, let's give her a brighter dot. So I'm just using a little dabbing motion. Sometimes I might use a little wiping motion, but I find that stippling gets a lot done in the end. I didn't used to do as much. So I'm kind of making these rough and exaggerated, which I might sometimes do when layering. I might, people call it blocking in. I'm just trying to determine where stuff goes instead of making it look pretty. And then I'm going to come with the other colors and do the making it look pretty. So where I see the edge of this is too stark, I'm going to take colors kind of in between there and dot it over the line. I'm trying not to touch the absolute middle. I want that to stay as bright as possible. So now I have a line between that new color that I painted and the darker color. So I get a slightly darker version and try to blend that line in until I blended everything into my satisfaction. With some colors, it seems to go a little easier, that you can just kind of go up. You don't have to go up and then go down. But roughing in is useful because you can separate the decision about where am I making things lighter or darker apart from the making it smooth. So I have found more and more that the more I can split stuff up, the more likely I am to be successful. Because I'm not trying to make my brain do everything at once. And miniature painters are really bad about that. We're trying to do everything at once. We're trying to work out color. We're trying to work out light and dark. We're trying to work out where things go. And we're trying to do all of that at the same time. And when I was showing you those paintings that I did, that's not how I start. I start by working out, okay, here's the major areas where it's light and here's the major areas where it's dark. And then I go in and start messing with color and refining the transitions. And you would be amazed at how rough those paintings are. I have a second Instagram account that's Rhonda Bender Art. So Bird with a Brush is my miniature-based Instagram account, but Rhonda Bender Art is my 2D art account, and there are videos there that you can see. I mean, it starts off looking like Pugh. Like those very nice paintings that I show you. Most of them just start off looking wretched because a lot of them I don't draw out first either. So I'm working out the drawing as well as all the other stuff. But I do it in separate stages. And the more I find ways to apply that idea to miniature painting, the happier I am. So I mostly use layering. With hands, I would probably try to get it right the first time because, I mean, okay, this hand is a big giant lady hand, but, a gaming scale hand is a lot smaller. So I might use a smaller brush than this. The separation between the fingers, I like to be dark, but not as dark as my real lining. Now, in the case of this super dark skin, it's going to be black or, blue line or whatever my really dark lining is. But if we're talking about someone like the medium skin tone, someone like this more, I might use like a shadow color for those lines in between her fingers, but not like my darkest shadow color. So you can use the tip of the brush this way. Sometimes it can be easier to actually go this way, so you're working perpendicular, so the sculpt is going to pull off the paint. So if I'm keeping the bristles like this, there's like no way for me to get light color paint in here. So I keep the bristles like this. There's literally no way for me to get the paint in there. If I paint like this, I can slip really easily and get paint in there. Now, the other thing I can do is just paint the fingers and then come back in after and paint in those dark lines. But that takes a steady hand as well as a good brush. So I probably would step down brush size a little. But the point is the most important thing. And then I would just start working up in the same way. But I'm going to be concentrating the lighter colors, partly based on the light and partly based on what I was showing you about, the knuckles are going to be white because the cartilage is showing underneath. So I always go back and give like a little extra dab. the knuckles. And then, because this hand is facing down, really I wouldn't highlight that part much more than that. But we'll pretend like the hand is kind of at this angle. I do think hands deserve more attention than many painters give them. I will say that. Because I think faces are super important because they show you like a lot about the person's character and what they're doing. Well, no, what they're feeling. So they show character and what they're feeling. Hands show what they're doing. Now, in this case, the sculpt actually has those lines in between the bones sculpted. So when I was talking about those lines in between, those are sculpted. So I probably wouldn't paint in and exaggerate that more, or he'll look like a little too skeletal. So I'll fake it sometimes on ones where it's not very prominent. Like I don't think it was super prominent on her hands. But then ones where, you know, it's very well defined by the sculpt, I might not accentuate that more because I don't want him to look skeletal. So I might even go in with like my highlight color and go in between those a little bit so that it's not as dark as it is in between the fingers. Then I'm going to keep those very lightest colors to just the knuckles. So I am painting in this direction. I probably could have painted like this. I wouldn't be able to be quite as deliberate about where I was putting things, but hold on, I touched my light by accident. But depending on what I was doing, it might be easier. This guy also has, where's the one I was already painting? He has pretty prominent ridges in between his hands where the sculpt is there. So for the fingers, you can see where if I went sideways, here I'll just do it with the darker paint and then we'll see the lighter paint or the lighter color of the plastic in the crevices. Using the brush perpendicular can be very helpful with some types of shapes. But if I were trying to paint this to look really nice and I'm like, okay, well, there's too much of that shape, then I have to decide whether I want to take the time to get my finely tipped brush and go in there, or come back after and paint the lines back in. I think his hair is decent for, this is a great technique to use on hair, using the brush perpendicular. So instead of doing dry brushing, if you want to like up your game on hair, use the perpendicular move. Because you still get some control over where you're putting things. Now in this case, I would want to, if I were painting this figure for real with the dark skin, I would want to kind of paint his hair to look like twists or something. So since I'm not that personally familiar with that hairstyle, because I don't have it, and probably don't have the hair type to ever have it, I would go look at reference photos to determine. In that case, the way I normally paint hair is to have a lot of, do I have anybody with hair? To paint kind of like bands of reflection where the hair curves, and then have other areas that are more shadowed. But that kind of hair, I suspect, is it does go more along the strands, the highlights. So it would be lit in a more even manner, would be my guess. But I would look at pictures to double check that. But then you can use the perpendicular move and just put the paint where you want, so you don't have to go down the whole length of the strand. I can just kind of go up here at the top to make the highlights more like it was on that guy with the red hair. And then I'm coming down here to the top of these strands. So the perpendicular move is pretty useful. The other place it's useful is, here's already painted. So when I painted the nose, I used the tip of my brush, but I could also, that's the cool skin. I could also have used the brush perpendicular. So you think this is the nose as it's sculpted, you draw the brush down there. The paint is only going to come out on the tip. So if you can see I'm doing that kind of, maybe this way I'll show it more. So I'm letting the sculpt do some of the work for me so that I can't accidentally get paint down the sides of the nose if I'm just drawing it down like that. Thank you, Samurai Jack. He sent me a message on the forum with links to the drawer grids. I know a lot of people are using 3D printed stuff now, but I've kind of... we decided that 3D printing is not for us at this time, so I kind of know very little about it. You don't have the space to mess with another hobby. And then there's some concern about breathing the fumes, and we have those silly cats wandering all over. So. But yeah, so when I was showing the pictures I painted and talking about colors putting in, I know we had raids and I don't remember exactly when everybody was here, but I put interesting colors in the shadows of both of their skin. So for this lady, I used this color here. So this teal color, and that's what's in the shadows of her skin. So because that kind of is a color complement to the orangey tones in her skin, you know, the little bits of red and orange that are in the highlight colors, it adds depth and it makes it pop. So you can't really see that color is there, but that color is there. And then for the darker or the cooler skin tone, and this girl too actually has Imperial Purple in the shadows of like everything. So that includes the green and the yellow, but most definitely her skin. And that's kind of the color that's on her belt. I ended up painting one thing that color so that I could kind of show what it was. But even though the Imperial Purple is not darker than the shade colors that I used on this, and just the same thing, this blue-green is not darker than the Ebony Flesh, which is this. I mean, this color is not darker than that. But by mixing them together visually, it looks darker. And then this one that had the cooler skin, I used this new color that came out this month, which is Carnival Purple. It has previously been available as a promo color. I'm just going to add a little water since it's been sitting here for an hour. But I will add a little bit more to her cheekbones too. And in this case, and purple kind of does this. Purple and magenta are kind of interesting this way. They can be warm or cool depending on the rest of it. So because the rest of this face color is so cool, it's almost a warm color that I'm adding in these places to kind of add a little bit of contrast through color temperature as well as the color shift. But purple I find almost works in every kind of skin color. And for many other colors too, actually. It's really hard to get me to stop using purple in the shadows. So when I paint things, you won't always see purple, but there will often be purple. I'm not really painting either of these figures. I was just doing this as a demo for you guys. If I were painting them to look naturalistic, I would probably use black for the skin, or for the hair, and then go up with similar tones to what's in the skin. If you look at people's hair and you do that dropper thing on photos, you'll find that there's a lot of colors that are similar to skin colors in here. So I might take the black and then like use the bronze shadow and just mix it with black instead of having the intervening brown colors. So that's a little bit different, but kind of like her skin color. If I were doing her as a fantasy person, I mean, the one that I painted for Reaper, who has more of a Caucasian skin tone, she has bright blue hair because apparently frost giants can have blue hair. So that's the way I went with that. hair color, I mean, you see people with all kinds of crazy hair color in the real world. So I think you can kind of do whatever you want for hair color in terms, you have to make your own decisions about the character and what they're doing and what kind of people they would be. And then just make it look like hair more than this color is specifically hair. The one thing I would say about this color is specifically hair is I will see sometimes people painting blonde hair with a lot of yellow in it. And if you do that dropper bottle or dropper tip thing on blonde hair, you'll see that it doesn't, it's more like warm skin colors than a lot of yellow. You'll get one or two places where there's a little bit of a golden yellow type thing. It's not that there's no yellow in a blonde hair, but it'll look more like this kind of yellow than this kind of yellow. So it's an earth tone yellow rather than a yellow. But in terms of color, that's the main issue that I see people do with hair. But that's why I was painting black around the edges of the face, because if I were painting this to look like, a real person who had this skin tone, I would probably start with black with the hair. And I would end up putting some stuff in the shadows probably, because I almost always do. But I don't know if I would use... It would depend on the rest of the figure whether I would use like the same blue, green, or purple that I put in the skin in the shadows of the hair. Sometimes I kind of have a unifying color or two that's going in the shadows of the figure overall. And then I would put that in the hair too, because it's going in the shadows of the figure overall. But there may be other times when I'm making a different decision. So I don't know if you can see it here, and this is why I try to do eyes first. I've gotten a little bit of white onto where her eyelid protrudes. It's not like a huge problem, but my life would have been easier if I painted the eyes first. Because I like to paint the eyes so that if they have giant raccoon eyes, it doesn't matter. I worry about one side of the line at a time. So in this case, normally doing the bottom eye liner, I wouldn't care if I got it halfway down their cheek, because I haven't painted that. Now I have to care. And I actually wouldn't have even done that part first. I would do the pupil and iris part first. In this case, for a person with dark hair, I might, or with dark skin, there you can see some interesting variations, particularly if they were like a magic character, a character with magical abilities or magical origin. I mean, not a character from Magic the Gathering. And that this being a giantess, there's probably room to get fancier with the eyes if I wanted. But my tip for eyes, if you're having trouble getting them to look in the same direction, is don't paint them in the center. So paint the person as if their eyes are looking off to the side. And then it's much easier to have them look like they match. Because when we look off to the side, our eyes don't look symmetrical. So it's not as weird if that happens in miniature. And I like to leave just a little bit of white showing under the pupil iris thing. There's a reason for that. If you go look at yourself in the mirror, or you have a friend, you can look at their eye. Your lower eyelid has some moisture from your eye on it, and it will reflect the light. So often the lightest part of the eye is right there. This figure actually does have lower eyelids sculpted. It's really hard to do on these scale of figures. So leaving that little bit of white between the iris pupil and the eyeliner on that makes up the bottom lid in a miniature kind of simulates that happening. So yeah, these eyes are not amazing. This is something that I might have to sit and do for 5 or 10 minutes without the cameras and having my best magnifier on and stuff. But because it's a bit larger, it could be interesting to go in and add a little bit of, you know, like a golden brown or something. I'm just using colors that I had from painting the skin, but I could get like a more intense golden brown, and that may be more interesting. Usually the rim of the iris is a little darker than the inside, which again, if you're not painting a bust or a giant, is not going to be relevant to your life. And then, of course, there's like the little pupil, which, I mean, okay, I do know painters who can do this, but I can't paint that on using scale miniatures. I just paint the dark dot, and if I want it to be lighter, I do, you know, like you can't, if you do a really pale blue, it's going to look like a dead person with their eyes filmed over. So I'll get more like a dark, slightly transparent blue and just try to get the dot in once so that it's like the white of the eyes shows through a little and it kind of looks a little bit like a lighter color eye. But the only time I've painted like really pale blue is to paint on dead, where I want the eyes to look all filmed over and stuff. But yes, eyes as a whole. Eyes are one of those things that I think if you ask like 4 people how to paint eyes, you would come up with 5 different answers, and none of them are wrong. It's just finding what works for you. Looks like she's rolling her eyes. She does seem to have kind of a fed up vibe. Which I guess, you know, if you're a giant, maybe that happens a lot. So hopefully that help give you some inspiration or ideas for how to paint darker skin colors, because I think we don't do it enough, most of us. And it shouldn't only be on characters that look like this. You would look great in dark skin color, and if you have the Bones 5 Learn to Paint kit, which some of those were still on sale actually in the store a couple weeks ago at least. So if you didn't get it in Bones 5, you still have a shot. Because I have several characters with dark skin in that kit that are done in a simpler way. So they don't, the highlights on those aren't going to look as good. They should go up a little brighter, but when I do the kits, I kind of have a limit to how much I expect people's patience to last for doing highlight levels. But anyway, hopefully that helped answer some of your questions about dark skin. Perhaps another day I will find a figure that has hands appropriate to practice on, and I can look at some reference and we can do what hands with darker skin, hands or feet too, because the bottoms of the feet can look quite different too, I think. So I hope you're all surviving the weather if you're stuck in... So Darth Abacus has a link to the regular Learn to Paint kits, but if you go look under latest stuff or new from January or something, is where you would find the Bones 5 Learn to Paint kit, which was only made for Bones 5 and is a bit different. It does cover pretty much the same thing as Core Skills. There's actually some stuff in there that's a little bit different, but not a lot. And the color selection is different. So when I made the main Learn to Paint kits that are on sale all the time, I picked the colors out based on what's going to work well to paint these 3 figures and make your life as easy as possible to paint these 3 figures. Where for the Bones Learn to Paint kit, it's like I had to pick out 12 colors and there were 12 figures. So I had to pick out colors, like a wider range of colors. It's still not a complete mixing set, I wouldn't say. But if you were more interested in being able to mix a lot of colors, and that's a lot what that kit will show you, because I had to paint 12 different guys. So by the end, I was getting pretty creative with paint color mixing. was like, oh gosh, what color do I paint this one now? So there's some pastel people, and not the people, their clothing. And like red and dark colors and light colors. There's a wider variation in terms of the color mixing. But anyway, if any of the Raiders are still here, thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show. There are lots of other Reaper shows to enjoy of different nature. So Ann Forrester, who is the person who developed the Reaper paint lines and is very knowledgeable about paint in general, is on every day at 11:30 Texas time, which is when all the Reaper shows start. Crows and Bones is curious about the expansions coming out. Those, in both cases, I picked colors that, like I said, that when I picked the colors for the actual kit, I was picking based on those. So there are some holes. So if you have core skills, it doesn't have a red, it doesn't have a skin color. So my goal in adding on to those was to give you some of the colors that you don't have inside the kit so that you can start mixing a lot more things. And then there is a demonstration in each of them of ways to use those colors. So colors you can use from the original set or the new set to shot you do for washes and dry brushing on the one that goes with core skills, and then layering colors that you can use in the colors that are added to the layer up kit. And between all of those, there's no duplication of colors between either the original two sets or any of the two expansions. So you can get all four things and you won't have any color duplications, and they should work well together. But in each case with the expansion set, I just assumed that you had the kit that expansion set goes with when I picked out colors that you can use for shadows and highlights and stuff like that. So yeah, and every day at 11:30 a.m. I'm on Monday. Tuesday is the Crow's Nest at 5 p.m. And if you didn't catch it last week, you should definitely go back and watch the video on demand, or I think it's already on the YouTube channel. But Jason Wiebe started teaching Michael Proctor how to sculpt, and that was a lot of fun on a number of levels. I'm kind of tempted to follow along with them and go do where they got up to by the end of the video, and then because I certainly don't know how to sculpt anything other than some base textures. So I don't think they're doing that again this week. They're only going to do it every now and then. I think they're doing an interview with, I feel like they told us who the interview was with. It's probably, if they can, I think they're getting Trey Manor, who has a Kickstarter out right now, and he's done sculpts for Reaper as well. Because like I said, Reaper is industry friendly, so they don't mind that Trey is doing a Kickstarter of his own line. So Wednesday is Miniatures Den. We had some Miniatures Den people join us today. And if you haven't checked out Luca Painting, I highly recommend that you do. Thursday is a Crafty Creative with Josh at 2 p.m. And that can be like basing, making maquettes. He does sculpting. He does all kinds of stuff. Reaper Live is at 6 p.m. That's the show where you can win cool free stuff. And also find out what new things are coming. So I got to show you this guy because Ron had already showed him off on Reaper Live. So I'm like, well, I can't exactly be spoiling anything if he already said he showed you the figure and he told you I was painting him. What am I? I'm not spoiling anything. And then Friday is Reaper Land at 3 p.m. And then every other week is Reaper Errant, which is a role-playing game that myself and some of the other sculptors and painters that work with Reaper participate in. And we are doing it this week. So if anyone wants to come watch us be ridiculous, please feel free. Thank you for sitting here watching me be ridiculous today. I appreciate that. I missed you guys last week. And I will, barring other appointments I forgot that I don't think I have any, I will be here next week. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to go back to this guy because I really feel like I need to finish him up. And we'll talk about, maybe we'll talk about the Shelf of Shame and finishing things and other stuff that I know I'm not the only painter who has problems with. So we'll give each other some emotional support on that kind of thing. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you all have a great day. I'm pretty sure, yep, we're doing a raid. So bye-bye. Talk to you later.